We're live.
Is it echo? How's it sound? It sounds good?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah.
If there's an
Okay.
echo, some of us have to turn our mics off.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ahi wa barakatuh.
Happy Father's Day.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Oh, thank you. Yeah, you see it?
Thank you.
Yeah, nice.
Black fathers
Nice.
in a social element. You know, I'm representing. You know what I mean? Okay, inshallah. Yeah, happy Father's Day to you, Professor Saiful.
Jazakallah khair wa iyyakum. Alhamdulillah.
Okay, inshallah, we get started. Bismillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulihi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsani ila yawmiddin. We'd like to welcome you all to, what's our new name, Sister Fatima? I can't remember.
3453 Family Elders.
Okay, we'd like to welcome you to the 3453 Family Elders. I'm Imam Fahim, your host with the most from coast to coast. So let's introduce our grand panel of, esteemed elders and queens and royalty and all of those great titles. Right below me, we have Sister Sauda that's looking very exquisite in that pink get-up. MashaAllah. Sister Sauda, how are you?
Thank you.
Okay. They let you out the royal palace to be with us today?
Just a little while. Okay.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So we have to maximize our time with you and make it the most beneficial. Okay, we have our sister Fatima Muhammad with us today, inshallah. Our regular panelists. How you doing, sis? It's been a while.
MashaAllah. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. And we have our sister Fatima Burke, the organizer and the orchestrator of this program, and we appreciate her a lot. How you doing, sis?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing really good. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for asking.
Alhamdulillah. And we have two other panelists. Will they be joining us?
No. Well,
Okay.
Sister Fahima might, but it's been a year since her son was killed, so.
Oh, yeah, okay, I remember that. So,
And Dr. Sabir, his daughter, was taking him out for Father's Day. So,
alhamdulillah. So those are our other two panelists, our regular hosts. And then we have with us today our special guest. We have Professor Saiful Islam Abdul Ahad, professor extraordinaire, a great brother, a great elder, inshallah. So he is here today to share with us his story. So Professor Saiful, alhamdulillah, you're one of my teachers, and I appreciate you greatly. The format of the show is basically, you kind of give us your background, your conversion to Islam, what do you do, some of your experiences, and then we kind of part with, some golden advice that we've come to expect from all of our elders, either the panelists or our guests, just to give us something, profound and to help us to continue in our journey in Islam with some of the wisdom that we get from them, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah.
All right, so basically it's your show. We might ask a few questions. The panelists might have something.
Okay.
But just tell us, your background and what brought you to Islam.
Alhamdulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala khayril mursaleen ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. I'll begin at the beginning. Okay, as they say. I was born in a coal mining town in Kentucky in 1948. Okay, Allotte, Kentucky. I was delivered by a midwife. Okay, and that was because there was no hospital close by from what my mother related to me. So I first remember being a small boy in East Chicago, Indiana. I remember it because of my 5th birthday with my mom and my dad. Okay. Grew up, I think like I was 8 years old, 7 or 8, we moved to Hammond, Indiana, which was right next door. And this area is right close to Chicago, right west of Chicago. East of Chicago in Indiana, right at the tip of Lake Michigan, that very heavy industrialized area. So I went to elementary school at Maywood Elementary School, junior high school at the same place. 1963, I leave Maywood Junior High School and start high school at Hammond High School. Hammond High School in our city was very special. It was the first high school built in Hammond, Indiana, but it was also, by the time I got there, ranked third scholastically in the state of Indiana overall in terms of its academic programs. And so I was in a college prep program. But, go through high school. Let me back up for a minute. I remember this. I'm a historian by trade. So what I do remember in elementary school in third grade. I don't know if any of you are familiar with a weekly little newspaper that they used in school called Weekly Reader. Okay, and I never will forget that in this one issue of Weekly Reader, it talked about the Prophet Muhammad. Okay, so I'm third grade, but it talks basically about the Hijrah, about him leaving Mecca, going to Medina, and coming back. Okay, and there's about 2 pages of the article. So from that time until I began to actually learn about Islam, I didn't hear anything else about Islam. Okay, at all. Period. At all. So graduated from high school in 1967, and by this time, during my junior going into my senior year, the conflict in Vietnam starts. And so out of high school, I went directly into the military, into the Air Force, to avoid being sent to Vietnam, and ended up in Vietnam anyway, for a year. I was first sent to Okinawa. I was there for 18 months. And because I was in the command, the Air Force has 8 command structures. I was in the command, the Pacific Air Command. Vietnam got first choice at individuals with my job clarification. I was a K-9 handler. And so I went to Vietnam, spent my year, come back, and get back from Vietnam, married with my oldest daughter's mother, Janaea, start school at Indiana University Northwest, majoring in history and political science. Graduated from there, and then went to University of Michigan for graduate school. And so while I was at Indiana University, I took this class during the summer it was called the Black Church. Okay. But a guy that I had played football against was in the class. And we hadn't seen each other for a while. And so we, saw each other. I'm speaking to him. And so there were class presentations that had to be done, talking about what religion or branch of faith you may be in. And so he said that he was Muslim. But what I noticed was he said that he was Sunni Muslim. So at this time, the Nation of Islam was very popular, especially in Gary, Indiana, because Gary, Indiana is one of those cities where the majority of the population has always been people of color. Okay, primarily African American, Latino. Okay, heavy dose of Eastern Europeans, but by and large, the total population out of that, 75 to 80% people of color. And so with it being so close to Chicago, okay, there was a temple there for the Nation of Islam in Gary, Indiana. And so when I asked him, I said, well, you said that you're Sunni Muslim? What's that? Okay. And let me add in at this time, I was Catholic. Okay. I was Catholic. Okay. Confirmed Catholic, baptized and confirmed. And I said, so what is that? What does it mean to be Sunni Muslim? Okay. So it just so happens in Gary, Indiana, there had been the first masjid, one of the first building structures built from the ground up as a masjid, was Al-Amin Masjid in Gary, Indiana in 1952, 1953. And the brothers and sisters who built this masjid were from Lebanon. Okay. the masjid itself was right smack dab in the middle of, African American neighborhood. Okay. And they had a rough time being there because people didn't know who they were. They had no idea what the masjid was, who they were, or anything like that. Okay. So when the MSA, the Muslim Student Association, gets started, Alameen Masjid is the headquarters. Okay. And the person who, one of the first directors, is a brother from the Sudan by the name of Rabia Hassan Ahmed. And once I spoke to the brother that I had played football against, I asked him to give me some information about Islam. At this point, it's not because I was interested in becoming Muslim. The point here was I didn't want to be in a conversation about something and I had no idea what I was talking about at all. So it was purely an academic exercise when I asked him to give me this information on Islam. And so he gave it to me. I went by the masjid, I met Rabia, and so I began to read this information. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have it, there was this transition of, because I wasn't happy as being a Catholic. That's the first thing. Okay. People would ask me questions like, well, how in confession do you divulge all that you've done to another human being? And they and they sort of tell you to say this, and that's supposed to get you forgiveness. Okay. So, and I never really did have a very good answer for that question, at all, except that, this is what was taught, this is what I believed in, and went from there. So at some point, I can't even begin to tell you when, I'm reading the things about Islam and I'm saying like, wow, if I really wanted to believe in something, if I was at the point that I was choosing something to believe in other than already having been Catholic, Islam would be it. And the reason was because what I read and was, in the information did not violate any aspect of my common sense at all, especially the aspect of praying to Allah alone. If I needed to be forgiven for something, then there shouldn't be an intermediary there. Okay. If someone wanted to pray for me to be forgiven about something, fine. But in terms of me divulging whatever it is to a person behind the screen and they're telling me, say 6 Our Fathers and 5 Hail Marys, in terms of that, and so nothing went against my common sense in terms of that. So one day with Rabia, this is about 3 or 4 months, 5 months, because I started, this class was in July and I got the information. And so, I'm going to the masjid, I'm talking to Rabia. And so one day, Rabia says, can I ask you a question? And I said, sure, Rabia, you can ask me anything you want to. He says, so what's taking you so long? And I said, what's taking me so long? He says, your understanding about Islam in some senses is better than some Muslims that I know. He said, so what's taking you so long? So I said to him, well, there's some things, that I need to get straightened first personally and otherwise, because I want to be in the best shape possible, when I embrace Islam. And he started laughing. And I said very seriously, what are you laughing at? What are you laughing at? And he said, I'm not laughing at you. He said, I'm laughing because the very one who doesn't want to see you become Muslim is the very one that's telling you to wait till you get these things straightened out. But he knows that the only way for you to get them straightened out is for you to be within the deen and not outside of it. So I said, oh, you're talking about Iblis? He said, absolutely. Okay. So that was February 12th. February 17th, 5 days later, was when I embraced Islam at that juncture. And alhamdulillah, Allah's blessed me not to have looked back since. I've never regretted my decision under any circumstances, at all. And indeed, as Allah is most merciful, uh, being in Islam has been the most precious thing in my life. It is the most precious thing in my life. Okay. And Allah in His mercy has brought me through a lot of difficulty. Okay, in terms of that, for example,
may I ask you real quick, Professor Saiful?
Uh-huh.
So you came right through Islam through the Sunni tradition,
right?
And you mentioned that in that area there was a big Nation of Islam presence,
right?
How did two questions actually? How did, when you became Muslim, how did it impact your life immediately, like with your family, your surroundings, love life, and then how did you have any kind of clash with the Nation of Islam at all,
or? Not in terms of many extensive clashes. The neighborhood that the masjid was in, brothers both in the Nation of Islam and who attended Masjid Al-Amin, that was the name of it, they had grown up with each other. They had known each other for years, okay, and had went, and some went with the Nation of Islam, and some came into, came into Islam, coming through like I did, okay. So we didn't have physical clashes as such. We had some very heated debates, in terms of that. Imam Wadaddin Muhammad actually came to Guyana on several different occasions. Okay, and we had a chance. He was on radio programs. We had a chance to ask him questions and everything, and he clarified some things for his followers there, because, for example, in one circumstance, a brother, he was there. He knows on radio program. Brother called in and said, basically, yeah, well, Imam Wadaddin, I just want to say, if people listen to this program don't accept you as, and follow you, then Allah's not going to accept them, and they don't believe in Allah. Okay, this was a statement, this person's statement, and Imam Wadaddin immediately shut that down. He basically told him, he said, how can you? He said, if you're following my teachings and my teaching you and bring you into the proper aspect of Islam, it is no way that you could make that statement at all. He said, whether they believe in me or not has nothing to do with whether they believe in Allah. Okay, and he said, and I'm really offended and upset that you would make that kind of statement. He said, because that's not what I'm about, and not what you should be about. Okay. So we had those type of circumstances, that went on. With my family, my mother, when I told my mother, and the date of her passing is tomorrow. She died 4 days after my birthday. My birthday is June 15th, so she died 4 days after my 73rd birthday. Okay. But at the time when I told my mom that I had become Muslim, she looked at me. And so her circumstance was about the Nation of Islam. So she said, so, oh, you're following that person in Chicago, Elijah Muhammad. I said, no, I'm not. And she said, you're not? I said, no. So I tried to explain to her what I was in terms of being Muslim and Islam. And she looked at me and she said, all I can tell you is that you're on your way to hell in a rowboat and you're rowing extremely fast. Okay, this is what she said. Okay. So if we go forward about 3, 4, 6 months, let's say, okay, she's talking to one of her close friends who has the same name as she does. You know, my mother's name, you know, was Catherine Robinson, and her best friend was Catherine Robinson as well. So, but they called her best friend, her middle name was Ruth, so they called her Ruthie. So she asked my mom, she said, you know, well, is Edward still in that crazy religion? And so my mother said, yeah, he is. You know? So she began to tell my mother, oh, I'm so sorry, you know, for Catherine. And my mom said, wait, nope. She said, I don't know what it is about the religion that he's in. He said, what she said, but he's an entirely different person and son now since he's been in that religion. Okay. And she said, so I may not like it, you know, because of my own beliefs and what I want to see him as. He said, but she said, I can't complain about the person that has turned him into. She said, I can't complain about that at all, you know. And so, person that I was married to, my oldest daughter's mother, she never did embrace Islam, but she had no um, problems about the things put into the household in terms of what Islam called for. So, for example, she had stopped eating pork eons ago. She didn't drink, you know. So there were certain things there that, you know, that didn't, you know, that it didn't cause a problem in terms of that. You know, so being in, you know, getting to graduate school, you know, that course of time through Islam, you know, with Rabia, and not going through the Nation of Islam per se, you know, and then I began to find out, you know, in Indianapolis, Indiana, right outside of Indianapolis, Plainsfield, is where eventually the MSA headquarters moved to. Okay. And so the masjid was just simply given to the community in Gary, and it's still that way, you know, you know, in terms of that. And so during the course of that time, I remember when I first met Abu Amina Bilal Phillips. You know, he came to a masjid and we talked about going to Saudi Arabia to study Arabic, you know, and to study, and got some, you know, information from him. There were brothers in Chicago, a masjid on in Humboldt Park area called Kedzi Mosque. That was the name of it, you know. And they had a Sunday program, very extensive weekend program, and we would go all the time, you know. And so met brothers there, you know, and that, you know, so that was things the way they were until, you know, then I went to graduate school, you know. Being in Ann Arbor, Michigan is, when I say this, don't take it in the wrong way. Being in Ann Arbor, Michigan, as a Muslim, is a place where you can become complacent and not realize about, you know, the struggles and the problems that Muslims, you know, have outside, you know, in an area like that. Why? Because right outside of Detroit is the city of Dearborn. Okay, and Dearborn, for ages, has been, like, especially from the late 1920s into the 1930s, has had a heavy Muslim population. Now, one of the primary reasons for that is that in Dearborn is the first Ford Motor Company manufacturer at a place called River Rouge. And Henry Ford Sr., he was enthralled with people from the Middle East. He said they worked hard, you know, they were not disciplinary problems or anything like this. And so he actively recruited individuals from Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen to come and work at the Ford Motor Program, you know, plant. Okay. So by the time I come into Islam, you know, Dearborn is practically over 75% Muslim and Arab, you know, to put that circumstance. And what Henry Ford did, he got the government to certify his operation or program to where they were very essential to individuals in the naturalization process. Okay, so I don't know, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals who worked in Dearborn, who came in as immigrants got their citizenship through that program. Okay, that he put into place. So I remember shortly after becoming Muslim, as an example, there was a case in Dearborn where a lady filed suit, disturbance of the peace suit, because in Dearborn they were calling the adhan publicly. Okay, and she didn't like the idea that they would call the adhan early in the morning for Fajr. She felt, so she filed suit, and it went to the court. When the case went to court, and this is like 1977, 78, and the judge ruled in favor of the Muslims. And he ruled, he said, the calling to prayer, in his decision, the calling to prayer was no different than the tolling of bells that Catholics did at different point in time, for Vespers, for evening prayers and things like this. And he said, Dearborn was one of the first places that I saw where, they would call their adhan, and brothers would close, and sisters would close up their shops, but brothers would close up their shops and go to the masjid to make salat and come back. And then, Ann Arbor, Michigan is only like 30 minutes from Dearborn. So between the Michigan State southeast, the southern border of Michigan into Indiana, it has the largest population of people from the Middle East outside of the Middle East itself. Okay, just hundreds of thousands. So you go different places. So in Ann Arbor, with the University of Michigan being there, Muslim students from overseas and there, it was so easy to practice Islam. People were aware of businesses and stuff. And so there wasn't, a problem with that. And that's what I meant by you could come, not complacent, but not, get into this sense of security that as easy as it was to be Muslim in Ann Arbor, outside of there, somewhere else, it would be just as easy. And that wasn't the case at all, in terms of that, So in graduate school, first semester, I went up in August. This was August of '84. I went up in August and got ready to just check Ann Arbor out, per se. Okay, and so I stayed with a brother from Philadelphia. His given name, that his parents gave him was Roy Curtis, but his Islamic name was Muhammad Mukhtar. Okay. And, he had been to Saudi. He was in the, Michigan's Near Eastern Studies department working on his doctorate. I met a brother by the name of Dawud al-Tawhidi, who had been to Azhar. He and his wife had graduated from Azhar and was there. And come back up, end of, we went in July, come back up at end of August, to move into Merit Student Housing to start school. And I meet brothers, and so we had a musalla. The masjid when I got there was called a Muslim house. It was on the main campus of the University of Michigan. But on North Campus, a group of brothers from Saudi, from Kuwait, from Qatar, had rented an apartment, 3-bedroom apartment, and turned it into a musalla. So they were meeting religiously, quote unquote, for the 5 daily prayers. So that was the other thing, being close enough. And where I lived at in Merit Student Housing was 5 minutes from the masjid, And so we got to know each other primarily from praying together, and that's how our hearts got joined together. And so one day at the Muslim house, I'm told there's a person looking for me. And I'm like, looking for me? I said, I just got here. Who could possibly be looking for me? You haven't been here that long. And they said, no. They said, so-and-so is looking for you. And I'm saying, like, okay. And his name was Abdurrahman El-Tilip. And in Sudan, in Khartoum, the El-Tilip family has a huge reputation. And so when I began, I'm in the Near Eastern Studies department because they were the one department left at the University of Michigan that for graduate school, I didn't have to take the GRE exam. They strictly went by my grade point average and the courses and program that I took from Indiana University and that. And you know, and I, you know, and I got in. So I meet Abdul Rahim, and he says, "Oh yeah, you know, I've heard about you." And I'm like, "From who?" You know, he said. So he says to me, he says, "I heard about you from Rabia." I said, "Rabia Hassan Ahmed." He said, "Yes, we're very close." Okay. Well, I didn't know it at the time. Okay. I found out later that they were Abdul Rahim and Rabia had significant positions in the Ikhwan Muslimin in Sudan. Okay. And I found that out because Jafar Sheikh Idris came to Sudan. I mean, came to visit us. Not Jafar Sheikh Idris, Hassan al-Turabi came to Ann Arbor. He got invited by the law school and he delivered a series of lectures there. Okay, and I had a chance, and I was with him and I had a chance to meet him. So Abdul Rahim and I became very close. Come and find out, we stayed like 5 minutes from each other. You know, we could walk across the courtyard, you know, to where we lived at. And he knew I wanted to go study Arabic. And so one day he calls me and he says, "Do you still want to go to study Arabic?" I said, "Yes, of course." He said, "Well, don't hang up the phone." Okay. So he puts me on hold. 45 minutes go by. And I, you know, he says, "Don't hang up the phone." So I don't hang up the phone. So he comes back on the phone and he says, "You have a scholarship." And I said, "A scholarship?" He said, "Yes." He said, he said, "Abdullah al-Turki, the rector of Mohammed bin Saud, is a close friend. And I asked him personally to give you a scholarship." So during that 45 minutes, they got my information and stuff because I had given it to Abdul Rahim. And so when he came back on, they had set it up for me to have a scholarship. And that next, you know, that was in the, like in the winter, like in February '84, that next in the fall, I went to Riyadh for the first time. You know,
Oh, how long did you stay there?
The first time, 7 years. 7 years.
MashaAllah.
And that was, of course, that was an awakening, you know, in and of itself. You know, the brothers that I met, the teachers that I had, you know, I found out, you know, there were so many things that happened that Allah showed in terms of the, you know, the beauty of Islam and, you know, in the joining of hearts, you know, together. I'll give you one example, or two. The brother that I stayed with when I went, because you couldn't take your family immediately with you, okay? His name was Muhammad Shakba, Muhammad Ibrahim Shakba. He was from Sudan. And he had, and from him, it was the first time that I heard about, you know, the Dawat Salafiyya was from him, okay? And he got his master's in architecture, and he went back to Riyadh, you know, to work for the government there. Once I got there, I found out that his reputation, that he was one of the best architects in all of Riyadh, you know, period. You know, so I get there, and I stay with him until my family comes. But there's another brother there named Abdurrahman at-Tassan. And in Saudi Arabian history, that family name, especially in the Nejd, is extremely heavyweight. His father at one time had been commander-in-chief of the Saudi military, okay? And so I met Abdurrahman, you know, we prayed together. So When I got ready to go, what I did was I asked the brothers from Saudi, I said, what can you tell me about your country? Each one of them said, don't go to Saudi Arabia thinking that is paradise, because that's where the Prophet ﷺ and his companions were. So that's the most important piece of advice that we can give you. Said we can also tell you that you will find brothers, good brothers and sisters there. And so they advised me, make your dua to be with those there who truly love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for that first period, that's exactly what happened. His brother, one of his brothers, Abdullah, was one of the 3 general managers for the Riyadh, for the public transportation system in Riyadh. So Abdul Rahman told his brother, so like, when Saif gets there, whatever he needs, take care of it, and I'll settle issues when I come home. Another brother, Khalid al-Mughran, if you begin to know anything about the history of the royal family, this family al-Mughran is very important. So he technically was part of the royal family. Okay. Then there was Abdulaziz al-Mughibshi, who was did his doctorate in education, and he was like the imam for these brothers who had gathered there, from Saudi, of different areas of Saudi and like that, and Kuwait. So Abdul Rahman tells Abdullah this. So I get there October 84, February 85, my family comes. Okay. And so of course, they get a chance to meet, Abdul Rahman, his family, so forth and so on. So school starts, new semester, school starts. And I'm, very, very, very busy. I had beautiful instructors in the Arab Language Institute. And so about 2 weeks go by. When I would call to speak to Abdul Rahman, his grandmother would answer the phone and would talk to her for a little while to give me a chance to practice my Arabic. And she would get a phone to Abdul Rahman. So for about this 2-week period, I didn't get a chance to call. Okay. So one day I come home from school and Abdul Rahman is parked outside of my apartment. And he says to me, go upstairs, get Saida, get Saida. You have to come to the house for lunch. Well, in Riyadh, at that time, lunch was the major meal, usually in the afternoon before Asr. Okay. So, okay. So for Saida, my daughter, she's ecstatic. She's going to Abdul Rahman's house. Okay. And we get in the car. They stayed in a part of Riyadh called Sulaymaniyah. And we parked, in front of the house. He opens up the gate, and that my daughter, Saida, she shoots in. She's gone. And so in the area of the Majlis for men, Abdullah's there. I come in, give him salams. And Abdullah says, you're in trouble. He's talking to me. I said, so what did I do? He said, you haven't called. Okay. So Saidi comes back out, my daughter, and she said, Baba, look what Jeddah gave me. Look what grandmother gave me, meaning Abdul Rahman's mother. It was like a gold bangle. Okay. And so Abdul Rahman's mother comes to the door that would take you from the brothers' majlis into other areas of the house. And she calls me over and she said, Saiful Islam Ta'ala. So I come over and say, yes. So I speak. And she said, what did Abdul Rahman do to you? And Abdul Rahman and Abdullah are watching. And I said, he didn't do anything. And she says, he didn't do anything? And I said, no, Umi, he didn't do anything. And then she says, so what's your problem? She says, you haven't called in 2 weeks. That means you haven't spoken to grandma. You haven't spoken to me. Okay, you haven't brought, meaning Saida, my granddaughter, to visit me, or my daughter, Saida's mother. So I stood there for 10 minutes getting dressed down. Okay. The last thing she said to me was, she said, Saiful Islam. I said, yes. She said, remember, all of my sons call me every day. And she asked me in Arabic, "Fahimt," which means, do you understand? I said, no, fahimt too, I understand. That was sort of how my experiences was, the first time that I didn't have any really bad experiences, that some people that you can have there in terms of that,
Professor Saif, before you continue, we got to take a pause for the calls. We got an advertisement commercial we do, and then we'll be right back.
All right.
So hang tight.
I will do.
So you saw that, the Black Your Man's Roundtable.
We need to change the time. It's 6 o'clock now, right?
Yeah, we do it one time for your mind in prime time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's one of a kind. You know how we rock. So be sure to check us out. That's our little promo. We do our halfway point of the show. All right, so Professor Saif, you were talking about some of your experiences in Riyadh, and then so I'm assuming you've been back and forth between there. Earlier the part of the show, you've been quite a number of places, Kentucky, Michigan, Indiana. So what's the extent, how far have you traveled around the world?
Well, let me address that this way, okay? The beautiful woman that I'm married to now, Sister Tilia Munir, okay? We got married. We met actually online, okay? And we met, and stuff, and we got married in 2011. We went to Saudi, okay? We were at
For the people that don't know, Sister Talia is one of our queen mothers as well. She's on camera. She has too much royalty to really be seen in public, exclusive. So, Assalamu alaikum, Sister Talia. Someone very dear to us in this locale. So, all right, go ahead, Professor Saif.
So, we were at Longside for Juma one Friday, and I bumped into a brother. His name is Abdul Latif from Philadelphia, and we had taught when I was in together at Manal Riyadh School when I was the first time I was in Riyadh, and we were talking about and I the possibility of going and so forth and so on, but not really anything serious. But I see Abdul Latif, I'm in, he comes in, and I said, oh my goodness, that's Abdul Latif. So afterwards, after Juma, I'm talking to him, and he says, man, we were just talking about you at Manal Riyadh, how good it would be to have you come back. I said, really? He said, yeah. So I said, well, if I come back, there has to be a position there for my wife as well. Okay. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed us to go. And so, Talia, alhamdulillah, has traveled a lot, especially on the continent of Africa, to Senegal, and and like that. But likes to travel. So during the time, and she taught school. She started Manar Riyadh, then went to King Saud, and then we ended up with her at Princess Noor University, which is the largest all-women's university on the planet. Like some 60,000 students, all women, at this. It's like a city, as such. And she was teaching English to the cream of the crop students. A lot of them going, becoming doctors, dentists, and things like this. And so being there allowed us the opportunity to travel. So 2016, my first time going to Senegal. Okay, then we went to Allah bless us together. We've been to Kenya, Morocco, Egypt, Zanzibar, Ethiopia. She's been to Tanzania. She's been to Ghana. Okay, you went to South Africa too, right? She's been to South Africa. So that was, we've been, and then while I was there, most of the schools I taught at were private, except, so the last school I taught at was King Faisal International Baccalaureate Program, and so within my first 2 months teaching there, they sent me to Indonesia, to Jakarta, for this international conference, as part of my professional development. Okay, statewide, of course, we've been to New Orleans, which is one of our favorite cities. In that, Atlanta, North Carolina, is that's where her people are from, and Florida. So it's Allah's blessed us to go a lot of different places. Through His grace and mercy.
This might be a good time to plug Sister Talia's the travel agency.
Right.
Hey.
Yeah, I mean, she's very good at what she does. She's does trips to Senegal. She has a trip coming up now. The registration from January 23rd to February 2nd or 3rd to February 2nd. Senegal is like home for her. There's so many people there that from the times that she's been that know her. I can give you one quick example to show you what I'm talking about. We were in a cab one day, my first time in Senegal in 2016. And we were in I guess you all would say, like, for lack of a better expression, downtown Senegal, around this market, what Sandaka market. And traveling, you always pay attention to what's going on around you. So we're in a taxi, and we're at this, stoplight, and I see this young man. He's looking in the car, looking and looking. So I'm saying, so what is this about, So he walks away. Before the traffic light turns to green, he's back with about 10 or 12 other young men, and they come up to the taxi. Mama Talia, Assalamu alaikum, you're back. You said you were coming back. We've been missing you. Like this, this happens all over the car. Of course, she will be somewhere. Mama Talia, and in terms of that, so now she's retired. She taught at Harambee Institute. She's retired. So now Allah's blessing her to be able to do the things that she wants to do in terms of travel. And hers is a more hands-on. She's really into the culture aspects. So this last time that we went, in this past February, we went to, several villages in and around Dakar. We went to the city of Touba, which is where this huge, beautiful mosque is. That the people of Senegal built with their own money, no outside money coming in at all, and that, so it's been that circumstance. We have a young lady there. Her name is Sakna. Mama T met Sakna when she was, I think, 15. Okay, and to this very day, Sakna's mother says to Talia, "You're her mother," in terms of that, So in September, she's going to Benin and Togo because she wants to take some people there. I think she's in the works. She's planning to take a group back to Tanzania again and to Zanzibar. Oh, that's the other place we went, was to Zanzibar. So it's once if when you're able to travel that way, you see and understand what Allah says in the Quran, that His creation is spacious. And if you can't practice Islam in one place and there's difficulty, there's somewhere else that you can go where you'll be able to. That's everywhere that we went. We've been to Oman as well, and to Abu Dhabi, all of the Emirates except Ain, but we've been to the Emirates several times. Alhamdulillah, we've been to Oman several times. And the reason we went to Oman, the first time we went, we met. We were at the Sultan Qaboos Mosque. It is absolutely breathtaking to go into this masjid, and so, but it's an aspect of dawah, because they have an Islamic dawah office in the masjid itself, and the brother that I met, Hamdi Al Barawani, is the director of it. And so we went there on our first, Allah bless us to go on our first anniversary. And and we went and we stayed at this resort called the Chidi. And so we were with the program from the Chidi, we went to the masjid, the tour. The place is unbelievable, just unbelievable. And so I got to meet Hamdi. And so Hamdi said, we were talking like that, and so we were getting ready to go. And so he says, "What are you doing tomorrow?" Because the next day, the day that we went to the masjid was Yom Arafah for that year. And so the next day we said Al-Adha. And I said, we don't have anything to do, like that. He said, "Yes, you do." He said, "You're family now, and we'll come by and get you, and you will spend the day with us." And that's what we did. And we've been close ever since, from that standpoint, So everywhere that we went. So when we went to Zanzibar, our guide at Zanzibar was his wife's brother. Okay, and in that, so and so Allah in His mercy has blessed us to go different places, see different things, and to learn and form very close relationship with brothers and sisters, who and you begin to see, that this way of life called Islam, subhanallah, is just amazing when you go other places, and see and understand that you meet a person, and the only concern that they have is that you're Muslim. Very quickly, one of the first times I was there, I was in the National Guard hospital, and a place I had to go, there was a brother in the National Guard, an officer, a young guy sitting there as a checkpoint. So I had to give him my identification papers. And he, of course, it had that out in Arabic on the Amriki. So he knew that I was American. But it also has in there that I was Muslim as well. And so I'm standing there, and he begins to cry. And so I have no idea what he's crying about. And so he says to me, he says, "Wallahi, Islam is the truth." And I asked him, "Why did you say that?" He said, "Because you are standing here from America and have said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Muhammadan Rasulullah." He said, and it's not that he didn't believe before that Islam was the truth, but the idea that me being from America and being Muslim was like not a seal of approval, but it meant everything to him. I had that happen on 3 other occasions. The brother the first time that I brought my car from was a lieutenant in the National Guard. And I met his grandfather, who at the time, his grandfather was like 93. And when he introduced me to his grandfather, and while I was there the first time, I dressed in a thobe and gutra, just like they did. And let me make this point now. there are individuals in Saudi Arabia who are quote unquote Arab, but if you put them in our clothes, Western clothes, in America, that's just another African American. That's just another person of African descent walking down the street. Okay. There's one tribe in particularly called the Adosari. Okay. They inhabit an area called Wadi Dawasir for hundreds of years, a very fertile area, farms. And they had they had Africans there, but according to the aspect of Islam, people came there, they bought their freedom because sometimes they came as slaves, they bought their freedom, became prosperous, and they married into the Adosari. Okay, so when I would dress and the way I wore my gutra, the headpiece, I had no idea that was the way that the Adosari wore their gutras. Okay, so my second job, my third job, but the first time I was in Saudi Arabia, I worked as a strategic analyst at the Saudi Air Force headquarters for an American company called BDM Corporation. And so, but we would go downstairs for Salatul Dhuhr and like that. So one day, I'm downstairs, we prayed Dhuhr, and a brother who I knew comes up to me and he says, and he has another brother with him, and they're Saudi. And the one says to the other one, he says, "This is who I was talking to you about." The brother that he says that to says, "Are you out of your mind? He's not from America. Look at him. He's at Dosari." Okay, so I said, so he said, "Ask him where he's from." He said, "I don't have to ask him where he's from. I know where he's from. He's from here." So I told him in Arabic, I said, "No, I'm not from here." I said, "I'm from America." And he said, "You are American?" I said, "Yes." I said, "But more so than that, alhamdulillah, I'm Muslim."
Alhamdulillah. Professor Saif, I want to ask you one other thing, because you are a wealth of information as far as history, and you could take us around the world in less than 80 days. And but I would like to, because I know you've taught in universities and you've taught in private places in other countries, particularly Saudi, and I think you taught somewhere else. And now you are an educator in a public school in Camden, New Jersey.
Right.
I would like you to just expound a little bit. There's experiences there compared to, because we had this conversation in private. Some of the things, it's like horrendous, kind of, in the public school system. So kind of like give us a little bit of that experience abroad and in universities, and what you see, what you're currently doing with the kids in the public city school.
Right. Right now I'm employed by Center for Family Services and detached at Camden High, working as a college success advisor. So as Brother Fahima said, you get to see, I've been there like 5 years now, and you get to see things, some extremely disturbing. But if I'm going to make a comparison, I could do it this way. In Senegal, for example, and possibly some other places, education is free, but it's not compulsory. So usually in Senegal, the children that you get coming to school are the ones who want to be there. Okay? Not forced to be there. They want to be there because it's not compulsory. Okay? And it makes an entire difference in the level of the sanctity of the classroom. Because one of the things that I learned at the University of Michigan, and from my mentors was, and I did a presentation with another professor, is the classroom as a sacred place. And it's a sacred place because this very special circumstance of learning takes place. Okay. But it doesn't happen automatically, okay, in this situation. So right now, the school year at Camden has been tumultuous. Okay. The first year that the new school opened, within the first 2 to 3 weeks, there were 5 fire alarms. The school got shut down, and they had to come in. There were bomb threats. Things of this nature. Students, not all students, don't get me wrong, there are some very gifted students at the high school facility, because the high school facility now is 4 high schools. There's Camden High, Brim Medical, okay, Performing Arts, and Big Picture Learning Academy, okay. But there's still the same kids that have drawn out of Camden, okay. So one of the things that you find is you have some students who come there and they don't go to class. They just simply roam the halls. This becomes a problem in and of itself, because try as the administration at Camden, all 4 principals have tried, it's something that hasn't been brought under control yet in terms of that, okay, in that circumstance. Those type problems in the schools, the schools that I taught in Saudi Arabia, they got the cream of the crop from students, okay? And so you see things, for example, I said to my students, I said, it's amazing that English is your mother tongue, but yet and still, there's students who come from international circles who have a better command of the language than you do in terms of its usage, okay? So I won't mention the teacher's name, but she's been at Camden High for a long time, and she teaches health education. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, there was a young lady in her class during lunch hour who was reading. 2 young men come in, one a freshman, one a sophomore. And this is the question that they posed to her. They asked her, are you really reading the words? And she said, of course I am. They began to tell her, well, we don't do books, we don't read. Okay, so you have individuals, very good teachers at the hub, but you have a situation where kids come in, the phone is either here or here. And no matter what you do or attempt to do to get them to understand that that phone is working to their detriment, becomes almost impossible to get them to put it down. Okay, so fighting in the hallways. They bring the problems from outside into the school. Okay. We had a situation where during the shutdown, I give you an example, and this is the point that I think covers the whole situation. In Saudi Arabia and other places, the families are expressly involved in their children's education. So, for example, if I had a problem with a student, all I had to say to him was, I'm calling your father. That's all I had to say. From that point, oh, please don't call my father. Okay? Because the father's going to come, and if I call him, the conversation is going to be, you've disrespected me, and you've disrespected our family name, and you've disrespected this teacher. And that's not going to be tolerated. Okay? So that circumstance, entirely different. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because one of the things that's missing here in education for me personally is the absence of the village. That proverb, that African proverb, that it takes an entire village to raise a child, is absolutely true. I was raised by 4 women. And some would say, oh, there wasn't a male presence. Yes, there was a male presence. There were my uncles. Okay, there were other men in the neighborhood, that we looked at and saw. They had jobs. They took care of their families, in that whole shop. Here, I guess the best way I can explain it is this way. One of my students, a young lady, she's a very good student. I asked her, I said, during the course of the class and conversation, said, like, how's the relationship between you and my mom? And she says to me, quote, my mama is not like my mom, she's my big sister, unquote. And my response was, no, your mom can't be your big sister. She has to be your mom. Okay. And she says, well, no, that's not our relationship as such. Okay. So in some instances, we have students who are like 17, 18, parents of 35, 36, 37, which means they had these children when they were extremely young. To coin a phrase, you have babies raising babies. Okay. And that circumstance has been a real serious problem, because if a parent, as has happened, has said to, I work with JROTC students as well, and Colonel Ross was telling us that, a mother said to him, well, it's up to the school to give them everything that they need to be ready to go out into society. And Colonel Ross says, no, it's not. If it's not happening at home, what do you think is going to happen here? Okay. And that's the point that's there now. Okay. I'll give you an example. During the shutdown, we had, Zoom. And we had a situation where this one young man, you had to constantly tell him, take your hoodie off, sit up, so forth and so on. So this particular day, again, every day, he's doing the same thing. So Sergeant Moody called to speak to his mother. And he's speaking to the mother. And he's saying, identified himself. He's not yelling and screaming at her. He says, look, we really need you to help us with getting your son to understand that he needs, as everybody else is in class, he's not the exception. He has to obey and follow the guidelines of the class. So the mother is like, I'm in a chat room with another student, but I can hear the conversation. The mother says to Sergeant Morgan, you're too uptight. I told him he could keep his hoodie on. Who are you to tell him to take it off? And she says to Sergeant Moody, I know what your problem is. In the most vulgar way, she said, you need blank. I was like, what? No, she did not say that. And so I sent a message to Colonel Ross. I said, did I just hear this mother with her son on the phone say to Sergeant Moody, he needs to have blank? And he come and said, yes, he did. The son says to the mother, laughing, yeah, Mom, that was a good one. Get him again. Okay. We had a situation. Two young ladies get into a fight before we left. Before we left Hatch, they shut down and then came back to the campus. Two young ladies get into a fight. The fight is broken up. One young lady calls her mother to tell her that she's been in a fight. When school gets out, the police have to be called because the mother who's been called comes with the grandmother, and they jump on the girl with the daughter that the daughter had been fighting. Okay? Is that type of circumstance. There's this disconnect here in terms of parenting. And this is not a knock against, because we have those parents who do take concern in what their students are doing. But there's so many who don't. Okay? Comparing that, my educational experience in now, with what we see every day, and what I dealt with, there's no comparison at all. None. So, and to point out what I'm saying, is since the COVID shutdown and the opening up of schools across America, during that 2 to 3 year period, 335,000 teachers, elementary, high school, middle school, have said, we're done. And they're not teaching anymore. They've quit. They've left. They feel threatened. They've been, physically threatened. I had to tell a young man one day, because In this particular instance, this young man, he grabbed his girlfriend and threw her up against the wall. And one of my colleagues made him stop. He turns around and tells my colleague, "You don't know who you're messing with. I'm going to get my uncle, and when we come back, you know what he did his fingers like a pistol. We're going to take care of you." Flat out death threat. Flat out death threat. You know, so say that to say this. My wife graduated from Camden High in 1972. And I met other people who, you know, from Camden in its earlier days. Camden at one time had one of the best academic reputations in the state of New Jersey. And for the past 4 or 5 years, it's been dead last. And teachers can only do so much. They're not getting, in a large circumstance, they're not getting the support from parents in dealing with their children. There's a young man graduating this year. He's not functionally illiterate. He is illiterate. He can't read. So the question becomes, how did he get from elementary school, middle school, to the high school? He can't read. So if I say to them, as I've said in classes, look, the author George Orwell said this: if you can't read, you can't write. And if you can't write, you can't think. And if you can't think, someone else is going to do your thinking for you. Okay? So that's the situation that's there. People look at me and my colleagues and say, why do you say that graduation day at the high is a very unhappy day for you? And I tell them, because I know how many students are walking across that stage to get a high school diploma and they have no ability. They're not ready to face the challenges that being an adult and being out on their own, that they're going to have to deal with. You know, and that's the situation that's there.
Wow, mashallah, man.
You know, I'd like to say something, if you don't mind. You know, as you're talking, like you're talking about your experiences in Africa and that, and I was in Nigeria, and the Nigerian women, when I would go into the market, they would look at me and they would say, "You're Muslim? You're like me. You wear a scarf. You're a Muslim." Like, they were so excited to see that. You know, but but the educational system in Africa is amazing. Like, they will teach their children how to read and write by the age of 3 or 4. You know, they're very, very motivated for having a future for their children. And we are told in North America, you know, we're told all these lies about Africa, you know, the poverty. I mean, there is poverty there, don't get me wrong, but they are far more advanced than we are. Far more advanced. We've dumbed down our generations. Our children have no self-esteem. They have no nothing. You know that. You know what I'm going to say. You know, and I'm one of them. But you know, I don't know why we've done this to ourselves as a ummah. Why we've allowed it to happen. Why we all listen to Shaitan, the rumors of Shaitan, the whispers of Shaitan, that our children are in a spot now in North America where there's nothing for them.
Right. Well, I can give you another example, because
what can we do to change that scenario?
One is, you know, when I was in school, this is eons ago now, when I was in school, the worst thing that could happen was for you to come home with a note from your teacher saying that you were a problem in that classroom. Because, boy, I tell you, you know,
you get a whooping.
It was not pretty. That's not what you wanted to have happen.
Yeah.
My mother didn't go beyond the 7th grade. She was born in 1923. Okay. But when I started high school, come home for the first day of classes, sitting at the dinner table, and my mother says to me, you can't bring C's home. And I said, excuse me, Mom? She said, no C's. She said, the first C you bring home, you're grounded for that next marking period. So as it would happen, math was not my strong suit, and I brought home a C- in algebra. But I also brought home a letter from the math teacher, Miss Board, that said he didn't get the C- because he didn't work hard. My mother read the letter. She looked at me and she said, I'm very proud of you that you worked as hard as you did, but you're still grounded. She said it just that calmly. That meant there was no but, there was no can you no, that was it. Okay. So next grading period, that C- was a B. And that was it. So but I'll give you another example. Okay. One of the things that I just detest is seeing young men wearing their pants in what they call the sagging look.
Mhm.
Okay. So in various classes, in JROTC, we don't have that problem because when they cross the threshold into the classroom, they're in another world. The hoodies come off, the pants get pulled up, you're off the phone. Okay. But in other classrooms, that's not, and I'm not faulting the teachers, it's just that with all that they have to do, dealing with that as well is an added burden. Okay. So one day in JROTC and in another class, I asked the individuals, I said, do you know where that aspect about sagging comes from historically? And immediately they said, yeah, the guys in prison were wearing the pants like that because they couldn't have a belt. And I said, no. I said, I'm not discounting that circumstance, but historically, that's not where it comes from. So now it's, oh, can you tell us where it comes from? Absolutely. I said, have you ever heard of what they call buck breaking? No, we haven't. I said, plantations, slaves. I said, sometimes a slave was chosen by the slave master to be broken, to demonstrate to the slaves, other slaves, that they were totally dependent upon his good graces. I said, so what they would do, they would take the slave, stake him out in an open area, have all the other slaves come, and he's on his stomach. I said, then either the slave master or someone he's hired would sodomize this individual repeatedly. And they asked me, I said, do you know what sodomy is? They didn't know. So I explained to them what it was. Now all of a sudden, there's this look of shock. I said, so this was done. This is called buck breaking, breaking the will of that slave and using him and what's being done to him to break the will of the other slaves, for them to understand that they're totally dependent upon the slave master. I said, and once that happened to a slave, he never was allowed to wear his pants pulled up to his waist. And anywhere that he went, it was identified that this had happened to him. I said, so if another person is traveling to this plantation and he happens to be homosexual, I said, then he would request that. If the slave has papers and he's out doing something for the master, he still can't pull his pants up. And that identifies him as one that this has happened to. I said, so when you do this, when you're walking around here with your pants down like this, historically, this is where it comes from. One young man actually said, I'm buying a belt tomorrow. To his credit, he's never had his pants sagging again. The problem is, there's any number of young girls who do the same thing. So it's a circumstance of telling them, that the world that you have inside of this high school, sometimes we say it's fake world because what's outside waiting for you, you have no idea. So another thing that we talk about to them is we call it the 7-11 rule. And the 7-11 rule is that upon 7 seconds of meeting an individual, they can form 11 perceptions about a person, depending upon the language that they use, how they're dressed, how their hair is, so forth and so on. Okay. And that can be the difference. So getting them to understand, you can't go to a job interview wearing a bonnet, jeans with holes in them, okay, and sandals. If it's a job interview, you can't do that. And this is why 7-11 rule. 7 seconds, person forms 11 perceptions about you. That from that point on, no matter what you say or do, they've made their mind up about whether to give you the position or not. Okay. These are the things. So when I look at this year's graduating class, out of the 70 or so that's going to graduate, there's 6 students from my standards that I'm not worried about being able to face the challenges of what they're going to meet either at college or, in life. One of the things that I do is one of the classes that I taught at the University of Central Florida was American History Intro Survey. And so I take the syllabus. They come into class in the senior seminar taught by a very dynamic teacher, Mr. David Nelthrop. That day when they come in is not his senior seminar class. It's the first day of class in my world history, in my American history class. And I take them through the syllabus. So when it gets to the point, a student will say, Professor Saif, you have 9 books on your reading list. Yeah, I do. Are we going to read all of them? Yes, you are. And if we don't, you won't pass my course. There's also a phrase that says, a standard said, you missed 3 days of my class, you missed too much information to be successful. Another phrase on the class in there, I don't take late papers. Okay. But kids, this is the thing that has puzzled us, is that the new high school that has the 4 high schools in it, the school was built with 2 nurseries, but the school doesn't have a library. Does not have a library. I don't know what the reasoning was behind there not being a space designated to have a library, but it does not have a library. There's not a city in this area, whether it's Cherry Hill, East or West, Maple Shade, Waterford, I mean, not Waterford, but in, other high schools around the area, they have libraries. But this edifice was built from the ground up, and there's not a library. So when I say to students, you realize a library is not just about for show. A library at the university is a very important tool that you have to know how to use. Reference librarians are some of the most important people on a college campus that you're going to meet. Okay? Because if you don't know how to do research, they know how and can show you. But I said, you have no experience in using a library. None. I said, other students coming in, that puts you behind the 8 ball, because they're going to come in, it may be rudimentary, but they're going to have skills and understanding how to use a library, how to do research. They understand the aspects about critical thinking, time management. Okay. And Mr. David Nelthrop does a fantastic job, and I work with him as well in trying to getting this information across to students. But some of them don't listen. It's as if, he has no idea, or we have no idea about what we're talking about. And once again, a lot of it starts in the home. There's no concern being shown. You have those parents, kids go to school from one day to the next. They have no idea what they're involved in or what they're doing. Okay. You'll see kids come, you ask them, where are your books? They don't have any books. For some kids, coming to the high is the safest place that they can come to hang out at for 8 hours during the day. In terms of that. But as far as them going to class, and it's not all of them. Don't get me wrong. Not at all. There's some fantastic young people at the high. Okay. But on the other hand, the fight that teachers have to go through, what they have to do, it begins to become easy to understand that some of them are saying, I'm done. Can't do this anymore. They say, no, it's time to do something else because I can't. And these are teachers who love teaching. They chose teaching, not because there wasn't anything else for them to do. They chose teaching because this was what they were called to. And they're looking at it saying, not doing it anymore. So when you have a teacher that's, it didn't happen at Camden High. Let me say that, but this incident was on YouTube. The teacher told a student, didn't try to take the phone, just said, put the phone away. No phones while in class unless I, instruct to use it. But he decided this day he wasn't going to put it away. Okay. And he physically attacked her. And she said, didn't sign up for this.
Wow. Professor Saib, we all talked offline. We got a lot of work to do. So I'm looking to brainstorm with you because I got some ideas.
Okay.
But as we were coming to the end of the show, we would just like, first, I'd like to offer my panelists, you guys have any comments or questions or anything? Or digital, online, and hybrid research skills via library spaces is critical. This is a deep learning curve through my first graduate degree trajectory. Okay, mashallah. Sister Sauda, you have anything?
It's just that I've noticed that the majority of the problems that we have, particularly with our kids in school now and the education, the biggest problem seems to come from the parents, from the home. And there's just so much that missing there now. We've lost our village and we've got to find a way to get it back. And also to be able to have some type of control. I mean, to me, I knew, that there would be punishment, when punishment was due. Now the parents are almost afraid to punish or to take any type of action. So those that do try, some of them, they've completely lost control, or they're afraid of what may happen, to legally. Me, I wouldn't care. I would still, pass out the punishment. But when you have babies having babies and they don't have the knowledge, and we've seemed to have lost that. We've lost control and lost the family, the village, and we've got to get that back.
Yeah.
Okay, Sister Fatima for the British Virgin Islands without the British.
Thank you. Alhamdulillah. It's just sad to know that, we're really losing our young generation, because right here in the Virgin Islands, we're losing teachers because teachers are scared to come to school with the issues that they have to be facing with the kids and their parents. So our kids are going to suffer for it. And yes, it starts at home.
Yep, absolutely.
It starts at home. We're blaming the teachers, but we cannot blame the teachers. If they have to be coming to school and be fearful for their life, and they also have kids, what do you expect?
Right.
What do you expect? And it's hard to really bring back. It takes a village to raise a child. It's hard. It is hard, very hard. SubhanAllah, it works me up. I'm sorry. It really works me up.
Okay, Sister Fatima, the second.
I'd like to thank the professor for coming on today. A lot of good experiences and information to share with all of us. And it's really sad, like where you were saying, where the history of the baggy pants. That's the first time I ever heard that. You know, they did a good job of destroying people.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Raheem, could I say one more thing?
Yeah, I was going to ask you just to give us some closing words of advice before we.
The one thing is that I think we as Muslims have to realize that within our Jamaats and our children, we are that village. You know, we are the village. You know, you want to say extended family, however it wants to be there. You know, but you know, we have to come together and realize that, you know, in our lives, these are, you know, to be that village is the rights that our children have over us, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. Okay. Not only to, you know, to raise them properly, but to raise them to the hope, to the extent that when they can make the decision on their own, that they will remain Muslim, okay, and carry the circumstance on. But you know, but in our communities, we are the village, you know, and there's a lot that can be learned from, you know, from us understanding and realizing this, you know, that, you know, we Muslims, you know, Rabbi Hassan Ahmed once told me this. He said, being a Muslim, there's nothing for us to be ashamed about having became Muslim and worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, it's not being arrogant, but it is being proud of the fact that we've been called, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose us. Okay, and he said, but we have to exert that influence with our children as well. Okay, and teaching them the relationship to the Lord, but teaching them, you know, as everyone has said, it starts with the family. It starts with the family, you know, and with us, you know, the other thing is that, you know, you look at the way things are going now, you know, I tell my students, I told them this, and this actually happened. The year is 1878, and it's in the state of Mississippi, and it's a meeting of the state legislature. And by this time, Reconstruction has come and gone, and it's failed. And the number of people of African descent who were in the Mississippi state legislature is now down to one person, and he's there. A white legislature stands up and he says this. He's given the floor to speak, and he says, quote, let's be forthright in what we're about. He says, it's not the ignorant that we are afraid of. He said, it's the niggas that we're afraid of. And he used Niggas. And in using that word, he was talking about those individuals of African descent, Latino, anybody who took the time to educate themselves and to understand what they were to be about, and in raising and taking care of their children. And so when I say to students, look, there are those individuals who don't want to see you succeed. It may be because of the color of your skin or whatever the reason may have to be, but you're remaining ignorant. You're doing the job for them. How many of you want to take the chance? Excuse the expression again, to be a nigga, but I explained it in what I mean. You want to take that chance to educate yourselves, because that's who he's saying that they have to worry about. But if you don't do it, you give them nothing to worry about in terms of that. And so we have to understand our children have rights upon us to raise them to fear Allah, to love the Prophet ﷺ, but also to prepare them for the world that they are going to go into. And I see too many individuals, young people in the 5 years I've been at Camden High, graduating, they have no idea about the challenges that they're going to face. None. So, but in our communities, in our jamaats, we're that village. We are that village. And our children have rights. We have rights over them as well, but we are that village. And hopefully, for us who have had children, who have children, even grandchildren, but have children and like that, on the last day on Yom Kiyama, and standing before our Lord, in terms of that circumstance, we've respected and honored the rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given our children over us. And they may not like it sometimes, but mashallah kana. That's that's what it has to be. And that's what it is. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. We ask Allah for his tawfiq, inshallah. Professor Saif, this is a very enlightening session, alhamdulillah. And we appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom and your gems with us, inshallah. So we've come to the end of the show, and hopefully we have you back. If you give us the honor to engage us again, we would love to have you back.
Anytime.
Okay, mashallah. We appreciate it. So we're in there. We thank all the people who tuned in and watched the show. And for those who may watch it after, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it of immense benefit and to accept it from us and forgive us for any shortcomings. Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka anta sami'ul alim. Oh Allah, accept this from us. Verily, you are the hearing and the all-knowing. Oh Allah, we ask you to make our scales heavy with good deeds and to make us be exemplaries of the village and to raise our children up to be worthy servants of you. Ameen.
Ameen.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.